All right, Max, welcome.
Thank
Good
you.
to have you here, man. I've been excited to talk to you. I'm glad you're back in town. I missed you while you were gone, dude. So I was joking with you before we started rolling the tape, and I was like, one of the things I love about doing this with people is that even though we've been friends for over 10 years now, there are some things I just don't really know about you. Like, what did you do before we met? Like, we met through, hanging out at the Launchpad and IP, and I was helping with various different companies and stuff like that. And you just kind of been a fixture of the tech community for a while. But what did you do before? I think we met around 2012, 13, probably.
Yeah. At Launchpad, I remember you were always hovering around out at the outside door there on the first floor. And I remember I probably asked Katie or Chris or someone, because I was in the first floor den there. Like, who's that guy? Because normally, if anyone was wearing a suit or anything fancier, at Launchpad, you could assume they were a lawyer, because we just had several lawyers.
Yeah.
But most of them weren't startup. They were just like solo lawyers,
Right.
Yeah. And
they were doing they were officing there. They weren't really working for the startups. I was like the one exception to that. Although there were some later that I think kind of did.
Yeah. And then there were several that had JDs and were lawyers, but were startup people.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah,
I like how you put that. I was hovering outside of the window.
Yeah.
I think that room was amazing, because I don't know, if people aren't familiar with it, the room was probably 300, 400 square feet maybe. Mm-hmm. And there were probably on any given day 30 people working in there at one time, maybe. Maybe it wasn't that many, but it was a lot. It was just crazy how many people crammed in there. And it was that was actually probably one of the things that people liked most about it, is that there was so much interaction. Although I'm sure there were downsides to that too.
Yeah. And they also had a good mix. They had the dedicated desk where you get to leave your stuff. They had the hot desk where you had to take it at the end of the day. And then there was 3 or 4 offices down there with I always love to joke, especially when I see it now, because co-working spaces love this. Instead of having drywall, they would put up the acrylic wall type thing so you could see through, but it is terrible for acoustics.
Yes. Co-working spaces that have that shall remain unnamed.
Yeah.
It doesn't help too much with soundproofing, for sure. But that room had you had to leave that room to talk to anybody. It was like a quiet zone pretty much that seemed pretty well enforced. Actually.
Yeah, it wasn't cool. You had to go outside. I mean, I would usually just walk outside, because they didn't have, this was before they would have someone would spend $4,000 on a pod that was soundproofed or whatever.
This was an early iteration of co-working. And honestly, that's why I worked. It was about innovation. And, there are lots of co-working spaces out there now, but they're materially different, and they don't have the same innovation atmosphere or of hackiness. Like, my first office there was a conference room that we just annexed, me and the guy I was working with, because there was nothing available for several months. Mm-hmm. And then, so we just taped a sign that said this is our spot now. And we got away with it for a while. And then occasionally somebody would be like, we need this room for meetings, or y'all using it, we'd move. And then the whole place was getting built out over this period of years. But it had a really cool tech, hacky atmosphere that I think was one of the driving forces and changed a lot of what happened here. And you and I sometimes reminisce about it. And that feeling is kind of missing from a lot of the stuff these days, because it was the opposite of what I see now, which is, formal gala events. Like you said, sometimes back then I was doing some stuff in court, I'd have to wear a suit. But nobody was wearing suits. Now suits are standard issue, startup fare. And I'm like, and then now I'm not ever in a suit. I'm like, what's happened here?
Yeah. And also just the layout of it. And then there were also several companies in the building that were not a part of Launchpad. There were other tech companies in there. So obviously that helped. And then, of course, as would be required of any New Orleans co-working space, it shared space with a bar,
right,
which wasn't inside of Launchpad, but you walked out and then 40 feet to the left and there was Captiville. And I think obviously that helped out, and certainly they were a great spot for meetups. Hack night, and they would open up the space for meetings. Good times. Every time I shed a tear when I walk by and see that it's like a design or architecture firm, and they have like the frosted glass up now.
Yeah. It was a really fun time. I think at some point something like that will emerge again. I'm sure, and I'm sure you'll be in the middle of it. But like, what brought you there? You also, one of the things we've instantly had for all these years is that we're a lot of the startup community are people that have moved here at some point. They're not necessarily from here, born and raised here. Both of us are, and that's one amazing thing about the startup community is that it's awesome. It's like such a cool thing to have, and it's something that really wasn't there when we were growing up as kids. And I hope kids nowadays can find out about it and see it. And I want to work on things that help them do that. But what did you tell me about your journey, like growing up here, born and raised? Did you leave and come back? Have you always been here? What was so like when we met, you started officing at a Launchpad. What was the context or the things that led to that?
I let's see. I didn't leave here. Like I went to LSU and then UNO. I mean, at LSU, let's see. We were going to go to school on Monday, and Katrina hit on Sunday. So we were up there. We had like 10 friends from New Orleans move in. I was there with my two best friends from high school. We all ended up rooming together, going up there. But, that was wild, and there wasn't school for like 2 months, and they set up like a field hospital. I remember they bussed a bunch of us down as freshmen to go pick people up from New Orleans, and they didn't really say where we were going, what we were doing, but for some reason it was like mostly freshmen. And I remember like the PMAC where LSU plays basketball was a field hospital, and then across the street the Ag Center was where they brought all the pets, and so everyone just did that for a while, until they started school again. But I ended up coming back down here, and then I did HRT at UNO, hotel, restaurant, tourism. I wanted to do like casinos or hotels and that type of thing. And I think, I went to school.
Which at that point was like one of the only industries. It was like, it's medicine, law, accounting, hotel, restaurant, tourism. And then oil and gas. Those were the things that you kind of spread out into late 90s, early 2000s. I think, there weren't, it's not like you were hearing a lot about tech companies or software or anything here at that point.
No. Yeah. I was bartending. I did that for a while. I ran a couple of spots, like a little bed and breakfast and a couple of bars. But I don't know, on the hotel side, there wasn't really any opportunities, and like, it wasn't that exciting. And then obviously we only have one casino here. I couldn't really get a gig over at Harrah's. And then, I started teaching myself coding, building people websites. I remember the first website I built was waterbedsplus.com, which was this guy who lived in the Wrigley's, Norman. I hope he's still with us.
Shout out Norman.
Shout out Norman. I remember I was like, Norman, I really have no idea how to build websites, but I'll try for you, or I haven't done it before. And he was like, here's $1,000, please build me a website. And it was like computers. Exactly. Yeah. And it was an e-commerce website, which is obviously, a lot different than an informational one, a typical website where it doesn't take people's money. But, I just learned over time and did that for a while. I had like taken, Java class at UNO, but the professors are very much so like they've been out of the industry for a while, and it's very like bare bones and textbook style. And, people know now it took a lot longer for people to realize that, but there's like code schools and online learning and all that. But,
did you do any of those back in the day, or just all self-taught pretty much?
No, just online, self-taught. When I was that age, there were no code schools, but I just did that for a while. And then, man, I just went in and out of like wanting to do startups, and like my my dad has always been entrepreneurial, and I think it's much easier for people to do anything when someone around you has done it before, which I think a lot of people take for granted when they say things like, anyone can pull themselves up by their bootstraps or whatever.
Right.
But I had been wanting to get involved at some point and knew about Launchpad, and so I just went and checked it out, and at some point got a spot, and for some reason I ended up right on the first floor, right across from Chris, Chris Schultz and Peter Bodenheimer.
Shout out Chris, shout out Pete.
Yeah.
What's up, guys?
Yeah, and Katie was over there, and then several others, and that was fun, and ended up getting into it, and they had their accelerator going. I remember one of the first things I did early on was like the startup bus thing came not long after, and they wanted like hosts and sponsors and all that, and so that was fun to do.
So you helped with that, and for people that don't know, there was at one point these two guys that had started various businesses. They had the school bus. They like painted blue. They called it the startup bus or something like that. And the goal was to launch a new company every week, basically. I think I never really did a whole lot with it, but it was an interesting concept, and I don't know really what happened to, but it was interesting.
No, so that's funny that you're thinking something different. That was local, and that was fun, and I love them. But I was talking about the startup bus thing, where it was this national thing where everyone, there's like an Austin startup bus in New York, San Francisco, Miami, New Orleans, and they build startups on the way to whatever their city is. And for the first couple of years, I think it was San Francisco.
So you guys took a bus from here to San Francisco?
Let's see.
Startups?
Wait, no, the first year, where did we end up? Because when we did, I was the conductor, and they ended up doing it in New Orleans, but this was a few years later. The first one was not San Francisco. I'm thinking of something else. It was Austin.
Okay.
But you basically have your little pods, and you get charter buses, and then build startups. And obviously, people would always ask, well, if they're already close, what do? They have to like kind of drive to other destinations. But anyway, Launchpad helped out with that instant. We had a New Orleans bus to go, and that was cool.
Any businesses come out of it that made it, or
shoot? That was fun, because that was one of the first times. We're not very good with anything seemingly in terms of coordinating regionally. With like we're always kind of like screw them when we're like Baton Rouge, Lafayette, Shreveport or whatever. And that was cool because all the little startup communities sent people down to New Orleans. Yeah. And we had a bunch of people from each area. Mm-hmm. Oh man, I would have to think hard about it to remember anything. There wasn't anything that actually launched, but or continued on. But the idea is like making connections and meeting people and that kind of thing. Because I know early on, some of the people that did like AngelList, Instacart, and all that were like on the buses. And
okay,
that kind
cool.
of thing.
I didn't realize that was some of the connection. I knew some of the founders of those companies, AngelList and stuff. That's cool. I mean, I think that's another. That's all the things that we're kind of talking about now. Really are the result of like these organic relationships and connections that develop, not because of like, I mean, some of it revolves around that programming and stuff, but it's more just the opportunity for people randomly to connect individually. That was one of the features back then of the community here, maybe a little bit more now. Now there's like kind of a lot of, in my opinion anyway, there's a lot of events that are kind of manufactured for that, but it's there. Before it was a lot more of like, we were in the same place at the same time, hanging out, drinking or whatever, getting to know one another, or occasionally something like that was causing it, I think. But I don't know. That's really cool. I think a lot of those things are fun because even if nothing comes from it, people get to know each other a lot better, as people, which then lead to more business things. There's only so much you're going to get out of a business networking event without like connecting with people individually, probably.
Yeah, and I think personally with Startup Bus and also like good to Chris and Pete and Launchpad with the accelerator leaving New Orleans, and like, you know, when we did the accelerator, like we went out and visited San Francisco and all that. And for Startup Bus, like we went and, you know, we went to what was Rackspace's headquarters at the time, which was a former empty mall. They could only fill up half of it,
right.
You know, but met lots of cool people there. And what's the 500 startups guy? Dave.
I don't know. I remember. Yeah, but it's fun. I forgot about those trips too, which were interesting, right? Because I used to live there and was really well connected and know a lot of people there. And I thought it was really good for people making those bridges in kind of that formal way. I'll never forget this. I was in a startup pitch meeting with a well-known fund, and they like no partner or any like person of consequence at the fund came to the pitch meeting. It was like either a summer intern or like maybe an analyst, and they like totally just were like dismissive of everyone that was there without really knowing anything about anybody that was there. And it made me realize, like, for all the complaints people get about fundraising in New Orleans, Louisiana, if you are doing the right stuff and you are working with people that know how funding works here, you'll get funded much easier than you do in Silicon Valley. Like, I very rarely meet someone who's actually lived there and been there, or in other tech markets, that think it's so much harder here than elsewhere. You do find it. And I do think there are probably more groups that take earlier stage bets, kind of on more ideas in tech. But that's also more of a thing that used to happen. You still don't see that often in any market. But yeah, those were good. Those were fun trips, notwithstanding that one guy, total Silicon Valley douche, pretty much. But I don't know. Do you think somebody ought to be doing that kind of stuff again here? Like putting together trips to other markets?
I mean, I think so. Definitely just seeing what other markets look like and other spaces that people either physically operate in, but the networks that exist, and just visiting, going to visit Twitter or Google or Uber or something. That's a big deal just to see that it exists, and not just know about it. And certainly also, I mean, we went and pitched some VCs, even though we were early stage. I remember we went into Battery Ventures, and I think it was because someone's husband or wife went to Tulane or something like that. Even
there's
though
a guy from here that
early stage
used to work there. Used to work at my old firm, and there's a lot of connections to a bunch of the groups there. I mean, I know I did work for everyone. There's a lot more connections people realize between here and especially there, but also New York investors. Yeah, in New York as well. But you're certainly not going to be here. I remember we went to Twitter headquarters, and there was obviously a massive catering and everything. I'm sure now they're probably serving prison food that Elon is running it. But then they had a DJ at lunch, basically a rooftop pool and dogs and everything. DJ at lunch. There was a DJ. A pool DJ at lunch. Yeah, there was a DJ and whatever you want on tap and overflowing. Basically, if Zeus was eating lunch, that's what was Twitter HQ was like. Oh, that blew my mind. That was the first time I had seen that. Yeah. I don't know if that happens anymore, but if it does, I want to know about it. That sounds pretty good. Oh, no. Elon's definitely the lunch lady over there slapping that meatloaf onto your ex. I've heard from people that were working there recently that. Yeah, it's a lot different nowadays. And he has a different approach and style. Maybe once a week lunch. Yeah. I don't know, man. I saw a lot of, at one point I saw startups around here. Some of them had napping pods and the trappings of fun and enlightenment, but it wasn't I've never seen any companies like that around here, at least. Yeah. And the napping pods always look gross and weird, by the way. It's I can't imagine, no one ever used them. I never saw anybody get in one of these things because they were enclosed. I can't imagine. especially in a post-COVID world
Yeah.
where people are still concerned about germs and stuff. Like what a germ farm with swinging napping pots would be. I don't know. It's gross. Maybe that's my own.
Yeah, somebody's got to keep those clean for sure. I haven't seen a napping pot in New Orleans, not yet. It seems like there's room for one in here.
It wasn't a New Orleans company, but we'll put one in here. We do have a video game. I've seen some video games. We went to Wristband's office, and they have a sweet setup. They got we got an episode coming out soon that everybody can check out. That one's probably the coolest one I've been to in a long time.
Are they in the CBD?
No, they're out in Elmwood.
Okay.
So they can, we got a whole building to themselves. It's really cool.
Yeah.
But well, that's something certainly changing at that point, in that 2010 to 14, 15 area. I mean, there was no doubt, Launchpad, I think, and IP, and that building in particular was, a really cool gathering place. And a bunch of, the whole downtown was in full swing, like post-Katrina. Like there'd been a revitalization of that downtown. I think a lot of downtowns. Now we're seeing literally the opposite, where people have fled downtowns. And I've had two people tell me this week about buildings, well-known, massive skyscraper, like part of the skyline buildings that are in trouble and need basically people to take them over, investors. What do you, one of the things I love talking to you about is that I think you're really forward thinking. You're looking to, help us in New Orleans and Louisiana in general, deal with the issues we have in a productive manner. What are your thoughts about the downtown scene in general? And, what are the opportunities and the things that scare you?
Yeah, I think, but you're talking about the vacancies due to Class A office space due to COVID.
Yeah, just Class A office space. It seems to me like a lot of people have moved out of downtowns, and I lived down there during that time, and a lot of people lived downtown and were working downtown. So there was I know a lot of people that in the last 2 years have moved out. So I think in a way that brings a lot of opportunities back to downtowns because they get too expensive. At the same time, I don't know, there's probably going to be a lot of short-term pain in some respects to that.
Yeah, on the non-living side, I always see New Orleans, every time I see a new restaurant, I'm like, oh, thank God, we definitely needed a new restaurant. I'm being facetious. For one, as much as I've been in restaurants and they're great, they're not, the glass ceiling is pretty low. They don't pay great. I would love to see more retailers and different businesses that create, opportunities for people to have a living wage, but also be a starting place for companies that will grow beyond those spaces or make more locations or whatever that looks like. And it's hard to say what exactly would incentivize people to do that. Certainly the government can do some things with either property that they own, space that they own, incentivize people with tax breaks and whatnot.
Everybody used to tell me is the opportunity zone was going to solve everything.
Oh my God,
all the startup capital needs, all the buildings were going to be provided. All of New Orleans, I think 70130 was one of these opportunity zones. I'm sure some deals got done with that program. I mean, I'm sure quite a few, but I never thought it was going to be. I never believe any of these programs are going to be the saving grace. They have not. They've helped, right? You and I were joking about this awesome table, and this is a table I picked up from a movie studio that hightailed it the second that the tax incentive program was reduced. And so, if we're competing as a state solely on incentives or a downtown, I just don't buy that's what is going to work. A lot of states don't even have an income tax.
Yeah.
The ones that do are all doing the same programs. They all go to the same conferences. I've in the course of 15 years doing startup stuff here, or whatever it's been, all the part of the problem to me is that all of the ideas seem to have a government component or a charitable organization component. And I just don't think that's if you read thought leaders in the startup space, whether it's Brad Felder or any number of people. I mean, no one believes that's the way. They believe it's an important part and it helps people. And I think that there's good examples of where groups are helping, but it's definitely not going to supplant what the VC market wants to do or what people are getting in terms of education, et cetera. I mean,
and also the tax breaks are typically trying to get out of state operations, whether that's movie productions or companies to move here rather than facilitate startup growth from within, at least the ones with the tech and whatnot. I mean, it was, with OpSpark, we worked with some of those companies, some of the bigger ones that had come in as a part of the tax breaks, like GE and whatnot. And it's sad on the tail end that the state had to go and claw back their money because they didn't meet those hiring minimums or stay as long as they should have. And that's different than like let's say in this neighborhood, we're going to have, retailers or startups. I mean, at the same time, when I'm saying retailers, obviously downtown, you wouldn't necessarily want to promote having retailers down there if the office workers aren't there to give them business. But obviously, certainly there's big corridors in the city where there's retail, this being one of them on Magazine.
Yeah.
But obviously I don't think just being like willy-nilly with like on the accelerator side, we've had lots of accelerators. I think part of it, I think after Katrina, it definitely worked well. Ideal Village being the one that rocked it out. But part of it is it's hard when they're like nonprofit models in several realms. Like one, sometimes they're competing on for funding, with the orgs that are trying to raise money. But
for Operation Spark, tell people that don't know what that's doing. And you were involved for a while, I think, maybe still are. Yeah.
Before I forget, before OpSpark, I mean, last summer in New York with the everyone is struggling with the office space being gone, and that's happening all across the country with like the downtown being sort of an empty core somewhat and lots of empty retailers. And so that's certainly not unique to New Orleans, I forgot to mention, but people know that. No, OpSpark, let's see, on the board, I'm the chair there still. It's been awesome to see it grow over the years. I think, we were, started out of, probably less than 10 by 10 foot square office and 4.0 schools in the IP building, moved up from Launchpad. Grew that as a code school. This was before the code schools were like a thing. And this was a nonprofit, like trying to get people access to software engineering careers. Our first focus was opportunity youth, which they're not really using that term as much anymore, but at the time it's just 16 to 21 year olds who were out of school and out of work in New Orleans. And we worked with a bunch of nonprofits and started teaching and developed programs from there. But certainly a startup nonetheless. I always think like people who haven't started companies tend to think that nonprofits are like totally different, but technically they're also a corporation. They're just a nonprofit, and many of the same mechanisms exist. They pay taxes like everyone else. They have to pay payroll taxes. They get a break on some things, the property taxes or whatnot, but everything else is basically the same. Yeah. And even harder because you have to publicize your tax returns, which is a good thing, but like generally it's the same,
Instead of equity incentives, they have to use sometimes really big pay incentives.
Exactly.
It looks like.
Yeah.
So, there's I know there's all that stuff's kind of public with nonprofits. Although there's still like a lot of things that aren't public with nonprofits, like, who does different arrangements with them for various things maybe and stuff like that. I think that I think there are a lot of great organizations, and I love the fact that like, Operation Spark, I think you guys are working with both high school kids and adults to help them learn how to code and learn software development, right? How many people have y'all helped to date, and what are the results? Because I think it's been pretty good.
The high school program's big, working with a lot of schools to train teachers and then teaching high school students directly. There are several hundred students annually in the high school program, and it's closer to getting them ready for, if they want to, a job in software development, and just preparing them. I think the one thing that's been great in the last couple of years, when we started out, it was always like, we weren't saying like, don't go to college, go get a software engineering job. But a lot of times, kids that are under-resourced end up dropping out of college. And so sometimes it would prompt them, but these are difficult conversations to have with parents because they'd often be the first kid potentially graduating. But to that point, it took a while, but they're now able to get credits when they're in the classes towards college, right? So they do want to do that. And that's great. And there's been several hundred people through the adult program. I don't have the stats off the top of my head, but like when they graduate and get a job, the average salary is around $67,000.
Wow.
And yeah, it is like software engineering level. So full stack software engineer. And there's several layers of the program that people graduate up to, one with the last one, immersion, being full-time. But yeah, it was a fun ride in startup. Nonetheless, we moved to several locations, and now it's at the foot of the Marini, actually at the bottom of Franklin, over by those coffee roasting warehouses.
Oh, cool.
Right on the river. And it's been really, really great to see it grow. And I've been working on getting more back involved since I've been back in town.
Are there night or weekend or online courses, or is this something somebody signs up for and either has to take time off of work or do outside of a job or something for the adult program? Yeah.
There's a boot camp is the one where they do it to lead up into immersion, and that you don't have to do that full time, but the immersion one is full time. So you do have to. It's not really possible to work during that one.
Yeah. And so how long is the boot camp and how does that work? And then how long is the immersion program?
I think the boot camp is about 5 weeks now. The immersion is, 4, I'm not sure if they moved it 4 to 6 months. But it's like 6 days a week.
Okay.
And
people can find this on the website if you don't remember the specifics, right? What's the website?
Yeah, it's just operationspark.org.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, it was in person, but became hybrid over COVID, and I think they either have hybrid or completely remote.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. And so, that's some of the thoughts on the cities and nonprofits and stuff. I also, one of the first things that we worked on together was perhaps New Orleans startup scenes, or tech scenes at least, most world covered startup.
Yeah. And
tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, because it was a consumer based startup. So, this was, I guess, right around 2012. I had met with Travis Laurendine, and then, the details are murky. This was right before Mardi Gras. We were drinking somewhere. I think it's someone's house in the Marini. Anyway, we came up with the idea to do, bathrooms during Mardi Gras, rent out people's bathrooms during Mardi Gras, and it was a few weeks before Mardi Gras, and the idea for Airbnb was born at that point, and it was instantly global. Like, I've never seen a startup before or since go from like you made a press release, or I don't think you even did a real press release. I think you just maybe did it on Twitter or something, and then next thing you know, like the Australian news outlets and European news outlets. I mean, and I was also surprised at like globally how many people were signing up to put it in. It's kind of a joke, right? Like there's a lot of startups out there that are like never solving a real problem. This is actually like a real problem that, for a variety of issues, people need access to bathrooms and don't have it.
It may have grown out of the kind of jokiness of drinking a lot during Mardi Gras and needing a place to go.
Yeah.
But it was pretty phenomenal. And I mean, it seemed like a lot of big corporations and others were interested in supporting it, which was also pretty phenomenal.
Yeah. I think it's harder for people who have not been to Mardi Gras, but it is somewhat unique in that way that there's a lack of bathroom options because it exists along a long parade route, which is mostly houses that are privately owned, of course. And so, yeah, in that way, and it's because a lot of New Orleanians, like, know that that's a problem and also can offer a solution in the form of their bathroom. And I remember, we were working on the tech side, and I think Travis was like, well, what do you want me to do? And I was like, go find some bathrooms. And so I think he walked around, because it was out of Launchpad. He walked over to Jason Williams' law office, and that was the first one on Airbnb. He took a picture. Yeah. Who's currently the DA of New Orleans.
That's right.
We had a web app, lots of people out of their bathrooms, and then it was opened up outside of New Orleans, and we had a lot added all over the world. And we didn't have it set up, it wasn't an app, it wasn't, I'd be curious, I'd have to go back and read Apple's terms if they would add that, but into the App Store. Yeah. But it was crazy, got a lot of coverage quickly. I remember I was just driving in, and it was on NPR in the morning, like the national one. I forget what show, and lots of people called. I was on like some Irish radio station, and Travis was on CNBC or something. I think he went to New York for it on TV.
That's crazy, yeah.
Yeah, it was crazy. Yeah, I remember Mardi Gras Day, the CBC, which is like Canada's BBC, called, and they're like, can you do a live interview this afternoon? I was like, I'm already drinking. I was like, I'm dressed up as a geisha, and they're like, perfect.
So you did the interview like that?
Yeah.
We need to find these.
Dude, I've tried so hard to find that interview, and like, I can't.
Did it air?
I would have to call them. It was live. It was on Skype. I mean, they said it was live,
but they didn't want that footage archived. Apparently.
I don't know, but it was funny because I went back home for it, and they were like 2 minutes before the producer was like, "Wait, can you sit on your toilet?" And I was like, "Sure, okay." So I went and grabbed my laptop. But yeah,
Skyped live from the throne.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, who knows? Maybe one day it'll fully launch. The app will be ready and available. If the Apple Store won't take it, maybe just go web app on that sucker and don't worry about the.
We have talked about it. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure everyone would love it, and it would be a smash success again. There would be a lot of coverage, I'm sure.
We'd have to change the name. I remember the day after it was on NPR, we got an email from Airbnb, and it was like, hello, I'm so-and-so, I'm Airbnb's general counsel. Can we have a phone call?
Right.
And that was funny. They were like really nice, and they're like, we support the sharing economy. They're like, we need you to put a blurb in the footer that says you're not affiliated with us. And we're like, cool. And that was it.
Nice.
Yeah.
There you go. I was wondering if us saying that just now might lead to any notices, but I think it sounds like we're good to go.
Yeah.
So, so after that, I can't remember what we worked on next together. I know you did some stuff also in the CPG space, and then you've been working with some restaurants locally. I know you're always helping various companies with software stuff. What other kind of things have been keeping you busy and getting you excited?
Yeah. I mean, I moved out to North Carolina and started a hemp farm. I was like, in my hating New Orleans phase, and also as an opportunity where I needed to get out, and went and did that. That was a great experience. But after a while, the farming didn't make sense to do anymore. So came back down here. Recently before I came back down, I went and did an NFT startup in Austin. We got into Techstars and did that for like a year. That was fun. I wasn't into NFTs personally, and I still am not. But like it was fun. The other guys were like, they had Bored Apes and everything. They had already been in it, and they're just like, we need a tech person. I was like, cool. And I learned a lot. And the blockchain technology is really cool, and smart contracts and Ethereum and all that, which is not one-to-one the same as NFTs. That was a lot of fun. Wild ride. Like we had a round raised, but like about half of it was filled out by one investor who dropped out, but getting cold feet with like the market and the price of Ethereum and all that.
I don't know if you heard, but New Orleans is just getting on the NFT. Okay. Even though maybe the rest of the world is not.
Yeah.
I still think it's pretty interesting. For a while, it was like if you've been in the venture capital community for long enough, you see these things regularly. And every time everybody's like, this is so different, it's crazy. And you're like, again, it's going to be so changing. I think there's a lot of interesting applications for blockchain and NFTs and everything. But, at first everybody was trying to pretend like they weren't, they could just fundraise without any without applying or complying with any of the regulations.
Yeah. That
didn't work. Then I think, they were part of the everything bubble that everything's been part of. And I think that scared a lot of people off. Like, what do you, is there any aspect of that stuff that you foresee being heavily involved in anytime soon?
On the blockchain and Web3 side. Yeah. I think there's definitely value there on the blockchain side. Like I'm never, which is again, separate from crypto, and NFTs, but I haven't like been thinking about it a bunch recently. I think what was really nice for me, like being a nerd, was it had been a long time since I had experienced something with like software development and getting into it that was totally fresh and new. Yeah. And so like the Web3 stuff and working with blockchain and smart contracts, it's not just like a new programming language or like some tech stack or some, like it was totally new.
Yeah.
And it was also really cool because you could, like what you're interacting with on your computer was publicly available, right? It didn't go onto a server that is like a walled garden, and for whatever reason you're using it for, like, you'd have to know, you would obviously want that to be something that's public.
There's aspects of it that are verifiable.
Yeah.
It doesn't, in actuality, get rid of the need for intermediaries in any true sense of the word. I mean, it's just never going to do that. And I think there's still like a trust factor that's involved with transacting and things. I mean, it's a storage medium primarily to me. That's the innovation. It's a different way of storing data that's maybe not really sustainable from environmental points of view, et cetera, and maybe not secure depending on how you're looking at it. But it's interesting. I think everybody got caught up with it because it was a new thing. It wasn't just like the same web-based applications and languages. It was, and I think I'm using the past tense, but mostly just because I don't hear it all day, every day anymore. Mm-hmm. What I hear all day, every day now is AI, which is essentially interchangeably could be used with algorithms in most cases. People are saying AI when they're just saying if-then statements many times. Yeah. I think the actual number of true AI applications is still kind of limited for the time being. Maybe that will change a lot, but again, I think the skeptic in me, having been part of most of these revolutions since the internet to now, just being an older person, I'm like, yeah, you're right. It'll be a pretty ubiquitous, like that's more believable that it'll be more ubiquitous sooner, because it doesn't, you can make any search engine look like AI and tell people it's AI. Half the pitch decks I see are like, we incorporate AI, but if you press the founders on exactly what they're doing or how they validate the AI, you realize they're not using AI. They have algorithms and if-then statements that their software executes. Yeah. So I know you're involved with some of that stuff too lately. Yeah. How do you tie all these things together in terms of what is getting you interested in what projects you're working on?
Yeah. I mean, the NFT stuff, part of it was the the digital art was what screwed the pooch there. I think that sort of people just got glazed over with. But to your point, yeah, totally right. Because like, even though it's public or publicly accessible, it's still everything's hosted on AWS or Azure, or it's all funded by a small pool of VCs.
To purchase it, to exchange your actual currency for digital currency, you've got to go through an intermediary.
Yeah.
One of them. I mean, there's no I mean, I guess you could mine directly and then create, or there are ways you could get around that, but not that the average person is going to do.
Yeah.
So when the average person relies on intermediary, it's still subject to the same degree of fraud or trickery that, spoofing a Chase account login. Like, there's just no, I never thought it was a solution to that. It wasn't a solution to that. There's been a lot of, But yeah, I mean, I thought the digital, it's funny because to me, the digital art aspect is, I like digital art, I guess, but yeah, I've been to a lot of NFT galleries and things like that. And they make me laugh, but they make me think a lot too about what art is and how we exchange value for it and what the possibilities are there. I like some of the things the new site is trying to do with that, or encourage people to think through. Because I think there's something I haven't fully processed all my thoughts on it yet.
Yeah.
And I like the blockchain. I like people having the option to use the blockchain for storage as opposed to one of the other, server clouds or whatever that are out there. I think those are cool.
Yeah.
I think that's a good application for it, right?
There's definitely good use cases. And I think with any new industry, you just are going to see an absolute shit ton of organizations start around it. And most of them will fail. And so, of course, like blockchain, whatever, AI, same thing. When I started up a hemp farm, a CBD company, that ballooned like crazy, like many died. It's just, there are cycles. With the AI, definitely there's that. And yes, there are a lot of people who are saying, oh yes, AI, when it's just like regular programming. But it definitely is upending huge aspects of like what we're used to. I would say, one is definitely programming. It is really surprisingly good at writing code. Like GitHub, which is owned by Microsoft, has a product called Copilot, and you can give it directions on writing functions. And it's surprisingly good at it. You can't say like, build me Uber or whatever, obviously, the Uber app, but it's surprisingly good at that. And so that speeding up, it's not replacing programmers, but speeding up their, what they're already doing and supplementing their daily workflow. Another one is it's really good at like doing basic writing. And so like people writing social media posts or documents, it is like really good at that. And so I would say in that sense, lawyers certainly like, I know in the law industry, people are talking about it. And then,
well, that's my favorite one. I like, if it could do what I do, I'd be happy. Because then until AI can go negotiate all the deals for me and calm people down, talk them off the ledge, and then be tough with people when they need to, I'm safe, because that's what I do all day. As you were talking about AI and its applications, like, again, I'm like a little bit contrarian on this. I mean, I think it's like comparing the typewriter and the word processor program. You're right. It can do more things. It can do them faster. It's not going to get rid of anybody's jobs. Like, I shouldn't say it will get rid of some jobs. Yeah. I think anybody who's studied any industry for a long time has thought about automation, and whatever can be automated is probably not going to be long for the world. That's been the case since the Industrial Revolution. Isn't this then just an extension of automation technology? That's what I think. Yeah. That did lead to certain disruption. You need 50 people, creating something that machines could mass produce. I think there are lots of routine tasks that this is going to impact. I don't know where all that goes exactly. But yeah, like, AI can't argue a case in court. It can't negotiate a deal or deal with the personalities or pick a winning fundraising strategy yet. Maybe it can. Once it can do that, then it can do, I think, anything a human can do. But I feel I mess around with it to see how good it is on legal stuff, and it's okay. It could give you an answer that's like in the ballpark kind of, without knowing whether the law it cites is valid, because it doesn't do that, right? Like even the best AI right now that's not from a legal software company can't validate whether the case is still good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's like a surprising weakness, right? You'd have to log into like one of the case reporting services. So
yeah,
and even then, like there's enough context. I don't think the machines totally can do that yet. But yeah, I get your point. Like I think I'd be the first person who'd want. I want to implement. I keep trying to get you to help me implement it for some things that we're working on that I think kind of push the envelope of what it would be capable of. But I don't know.
You have to train it well. I think.
Yeah.
Like right. Yeah. I mean, we're at let's see. November 2022 was when ChatGPT came out, so it's pretty fresh. And like when you train it on specific documents, it's much better. In general, when you're just asking it, in general, random questions. But like if you had like it was just learning about, it was specifically trained on like law, which I'm sure people are working on. It could get better. The personal assistant thing will probably be. They're rocking that out. That's not too hard. I think that'll definitely be a thing where you can just tell it to do what a personal assistant would do. But people have been doing that kind of thing for a while.
AI is something I hear about a lot lately. That's certainly the newest thing. I don't know. I think you were telling me a little bit about like what's the most. What are the things? What are the applications in particular you'd like to work on maybe in that space?
Shoot, yeah. Let's see. I've been doing like political stuff here, and I've been trying to train it on like everyone just has. They're like they don't know how anything works, so you can just talk to the AI to say, who's my elected official? What do they do? How many registered voters are in Louisiana? That type of thing. And it's pretty easy to train ChatGPT's, OpenAI's product ChatGPT on that. That's been fun. And then I played around with like a couple of friends' businesses they're like, I want to train my employees and just upload my manual and all that kind of stuff. And it's, really surprisingly good at that kind of thing.
There's some companies that have raised a lot of money. I looked at one as a VC that was really pretty cool. And the founders had real chops. I think that's like going to be the first widespread sort of like application, like taking internal company docs that would normally get answered by a person, and basically it's like the new customer service, but for employees.
Yeah,
I think people have the same experience with it. Like they'll get certain answers that they could have found anyway if they tried, but this interface is making it easier for them. And then eventually everybody will be like, they'll have to go ask the person. So,
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I think like
maybe it'll take one person instead of 10 HR people, right?
Yeah. And I mean, that like, does that excite me personally? I mean, the political one does, but not my friends, my training manuals. But the image generation stuff is really fun to deal with. Like just to DALL-E has not been nearly as good. That's OpenAI's product as much as Midjourney. Midjourney is really good with prompts, and you have to just be really specific, and it can create like all kinds of incredible things, including images that you are giving it, not just from scratch. And then
interesting.
They're like
I haven't played with those. I need to start playing with that. I think that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, and then there's DALL-E, they changed the interface because it was terrible to where it's just inside of ChatGPT. But the other products, there's, obviously there's a bunch that you can play around with. There's one, Pi.ai is really good because ChatGPT is very robotic and doesn't talk to you like a human. Pi.ai is really great to interact with because it talks to you like an empathetic human would, and you can talk to it about like career advice and basically give you therapy or whatever. You can talk to about anything. And I think that is definitely really has great potential. I would say like even on like the therapy side with the mental health crisis or just in, the US and beyond, clearly, a lot of people need to talk to a therapist more often than they do, which is basically never, that type of thing. And then I was surprised though, with some of these products when you're talking to them. So I like that aspect of it.
I didn't even know that was an application, but yeah, I think that could be interesting. I'm definitely still processing like what I think about it. I mean, in a way, I think that they're more user-friendly search engines if I'm being skeptical. And then in another way, I mean, they're definitely making, they're helping automate other tasks. Like there's no doubt, which is the true, leap forward in a lot of technological revolutions. So, I think on the other hand, like, especially as it meets with robotics and like real world physical problems, I still joke, I'm like, we have dishwashers, which are like probably some of our best robots in laundry machines, right? But like I kind of laugh when we're, building some of these robots or trying to build self-driving cars, which can't seem to work. And there's no like robot that really pre-washes one's dishes before they go. Like, I think there's lower hanging fruit we need to solve before. But I don't know. Again, every few years there's a new thing that's the biggest thing that's going to end all the other things, and it might happen. Like, I don't totally write it off.
Yeah,
it hasn't happened yet, unless we're all truly in the already in. It's kind of funny if we're already in the AI revolution. I guess we're just being notified by the AI that the AI is here. Which begs the question of why now.
Yeah, I think it is interesting for like someone who's not in tech or at all to be. There's all these people who are very scared, and it always just alludes to Terminator about how when the robots decide to take over, and there's all these people who are scared of that, and the OpenAI drama with Sam Altman getting pushed out is directly related to that. I think at the very least, though, it's cool that a startup had really pushed all this forward seemingly out of nowhere, even though they were in fact working on it for years ahead of time. But so were Google and Microsoft were also working on it. But I like that aspect of it. That boom, out of nowhere, seemingly we had ChatGPT enter. Well,
I think what happened is like one app became popularly known. Like I've known for the past 10 years probably people in the hedge fund space and other spaces that have been using AI for trading and whatnot. I mean, I just don't think, and lots of other medical applications, nanotechnology. I mean, I think the technology, has become more popularized. And I think partially it's because there's always a need for the next thing. Like the tech blogs and news outlets need a next tech thing to kind of make people question the future, right? I bet if you went back 100 years, there's something every 4 or 5 years that's going to make everyone obsolete and everything obsolete. And I that's just, I tend to just recognize that pattern, but I don't deny that it's going to change a lot of stuff. I think the only constant seems to be change. I do think, like San Francisco's banned the self-driving cars, like I alluded to, because they were causing a lot of problems. Now, there are probably people out there that are like, they were fine, it's just political. But I don't know. You can watch those videos and determine pretty quickly. And maybe it was humans manipulating the weaknesses of the AI. But that is a part of a thing with machines. Like, we ban all kinds of machines if they're overtly dangerous, either because of human error or exploitation. And AIs or any kind of software shouldn't be any different. Like, we should put guardrails around it if people are going to, use it improperly or do. I don't think this is unique or introduces like ideas that our brains haven't already applied a framework to for the most part.
Yeah. I mean, the big thing with what you're talking about is historically is when it hits the general consciousness of any population in America or globally is when the consumers start using it. Yeah. And so like they're not doing the algo trading and all that, right? Right. So, but they can download ChatGPT and use it in their pocket. And of course they were smart to offer up a free tier. And I mean, over 100 million users within a matter of weeks is incredible growth.
That's incredible.
Because you talk about, people say, oh yeah, well, Meta with Threads or whatever, but Meta was pimping that out via or Facebook and Instagram, obviously, but OpenAI didn't have any users before getting to the 100 mil, really, right? And so that's incredible.
That's incredible.
And certainly they're really well funded, but I just, that's cool. But certainly, it's when the consumers start using it. And like to New Orleans, like talking about the Airbnb thing or whatever, all the big New Orleans startups are B2B, right? Historically.
Yeah. I would say in the last 10 years, like prior to that, arguably all of our massive exports were consumer, right? Because like we had a giant banana company empire, right? That was probably the first multinational corporation.
Yeah.
There's been Progresso Foods, Popeyes. I mean, actually, like, and that's why for so many years one of the things I've put in our data reports is like, a lot of times it's mobile apps and SaaS that have the most deal done, followed by consumer products. Yeah. It seems like, and there are definitely some of those that are gaining traction. I think one of the cool things I think about New Orleans is like, we seem to get people and what people like. It's a theme in that episode of Constant Purpose we're about to release, but we've got to have, and I'm going to run the data, but like per capita, we've got to have had some of the highest proportions of mass global consumer product success out there. We've certainly have had a massive impact on like just the global partying atmosphere. You know what I mean? We're a very small state compared to a lot of places, and we seem to be able to capture like the popular consumer attitude and belief about something. And I don't know what it is about here that allows us to do that, but we seem to have it. You guys did it. Like y'all took a very basic human issue and, tongue in cheek kind of elevated it to a status where like, it was pretty big, and maybe you can still run with that. I don't know. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. We might have to have a different name next time around.
Right. And you're representing Cafe Habana, and I know you've been involved with that. That's like, I don't know, other than you, I don't know anybody involved with that. I've kind of like seen some of the headlines over the years, and that one seemed like one of the things that you and I and everybody else in New Orleans talk about for the most part, like at least people in the community trying to push things forward and like have a chance to build businesses and get out there. It seemed like it was just ridiculously hard for them to get open and get, I mean, it was insane. Like I'm seeing it right now where, in different projects, like all we're waiting on is Entergy to do its job to approve something, or, the city is taking 3 months minimum to look at permit things. Like, I don't know if you want to share any of that experience and relate it to just New Orleans and our state of politics in the state of Louisiana or whatever. But I figured I wanted to give you the opportunity because it seemed insane.
Let's see. I met Sean. Sean Meaden is the proprietor of Habana Outpost, and the French Quarter. It's on the corner of Rampart and Esplanade. It's been around in New York. There's another one in New York that's been around for over 20 years. And he came down here in 2012 to get it opened up and bought this spot. It was an abandoned gas station, like hadn't been in use for years, right on the corner of the quarter there. And the NIMBY vibes were very strong at the time. They didn't want anything else there, even though it was like a decrepit corner.
It was literally like vacant, harboring crime, like some of the stuff around here.
People hanging out there, in the little tiny parking lot. And I think, they had sort of been like no new development on this side of the quarter because it's quieter on the backside. And if you're familiar with the French Quarter, it is quieter. It's mostly houses and whatnot, but 2 blocks away is Portical, and there's Bufos right there. Much to Sidney Torres' ire previously. But they drew up the plans and all that, and they fought him hard on it for years. And the French Quarter has the VCC, the Vieux Carré Commission, which is probably one of the most hardcore historical oversight commissions in the country, for better or worse, to preserve the historical integrity of the French Quarter. And for various reasons, it was really hard for him to come down and open it up. And, they said, oh, this guy from Brooklyn doesn't know, he operates this global chain or whatever. And
why is that bad?
Years and years.
That's an interesting viewpoint that like somebody has locations elsewhere. We don't want it here. I get they don't want, just like a bunch of fast food things. But part of being a city and a dynamic city, actually the reason New Orleans has heritage is its connection to the broader world. Like the fact that we were a port of call that dealt with internationally, where we were, trading. That was what. It's funny that the things that made a place historically significant and basically allowed the nice buildings that we have in the French Quarter. Now the attitude is we must destroy ourselves to save ourselves.
Yeah.
That's essentially what this, like such a draconian attitude might amount to.
Yeah.
Taken to an extreme,
Yeah, it's totally true. And they even have rules. The reason why there's no fast food in the quarter, I forget what exactly the rule is, but you can't like walk up and order your food and go to your table. There's some rule they have to keep out McDonald's or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so they hated for years. A bunch of people went to city hall meetings and they're like, what's going on? This is messed up. We should invite, new developments and all that. And also up in Brooklyn, Havana Outpost was the first solar powered restaurant in New York, and super green and all that. And it took years and years and a bunch of money. And, it's the first geothermal restaurant in New Orleans. There's like, I think 18 300-foot deep wells underneath that bring up water to heat and cool the restaurant. And I'm sure that was not easy to get permitted. No, but it's, after the fact, everyone's like, it's just, of course, I think part of it is like some of the old people honestly just probably died. And then COVID, they were like shifted their priorities, and then now neighbors come by and they're like, I don't know why we ever hated this kind of thing, Right. And I remember I helped open it up, and we been trying to open since 2012 on the sign out front, which is totally true and wild to think about.
That's insane.
Because it opened, this
2022 or 2023 it opened, or
like before Mardi Gras.
So that's almost 10 years trying to open basically a taco stand. And I mean, it's much more than that because there's inside seating and restaurant, but I mean, at essence, it's not an overly complicated concept. It's just insane that's insane. It's very sad. I think it reflects poorly on like who we are as a city and a people it's not like a lot of folks around here that are probably complaining about a lot of things are ponying up the money to help employ people or start new businesses either. Yeah. And again, I'm not sure where we go if we don't welcome, like people are seeking New Orleans out to build things, and that's what we have going for it. And then to be like, no, you can't do it is just insane and sad.
I think also just more so just like the personality test that he wasn't trying to build like a Disney World style or like some ugly chain type thing.
Right. It's very consistent actually with like New Orleans history to me. I mean, I don't know about I don't know New Orleans full Cuban history, but there is quite a bit. I grew up with a lot of people that were, whose family were expats, but the outdoor seating and, a lot of Cuban dishes like harken back to our Spanish roots here. So that's insane to me, but I'm glad they're open. I hope everybody goes and checks it out and has a drink and gets some food. The food is really great. The atmosphere is super cool. Great job with it. I mean, it's a cool spot. Yeah.
They have the No Habana Outpost sign up in the window that people had up for years all over the quarter. And, they have one in the window there just for like a museum piece. And I noticed when I came back in town, the same people that had the No Habana Outpost had the, we're called Latoya, in the window basically. But it's just funny because people I know that were hating on it, our customers there.
That's good.
As it goes, I guess.
As it goes.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, any other projects that you're working on? Or, I mean, actually, I want to touch on this because you and I are talking about a lot of this as people who have probably not been like highly politically mobilized maybe, or at least I haven't. I'm learning a lot from you about this stuff. You always give me like facts about our state and everything that I'm like, I think people need to know and just don't know. Like I think one night you were texting me about like how many elected officials, either total or in any given year, we have under indictment or they've been indicted or something. And
yeah,
tell everybody some of these facts that you recall, if you recall.
Well, I think the context would be before I went up to North Carolina like 2017. We're trying to organize a political group to do basically anything because it's just same old Louisiana or New Orleans style, nothing getting done kind of thing. And I come back 6 years later. Not only has nothing changed, but COVID has happened and it's just worse. And I was like, well, let's get back into it. And on the stats side, the DOJ, I'm not sure why they stopped publishing it, but they used to give Congress stats on how many public officials they have put away every year, and then by state and by district, by their districts,
by a congressional district or something,
or no, the Southern District of New York, or however the prosecuting districts go with the DOJ.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Eastern District of Louisiana.
Yeah. Exactly. That's and so. I knew Louisiana for a long time has had the most top 3 per capita based upon the population and number of politicians that have been convicted on public corruption charges. But I didn't think we would be like the top total. Like I assumed it would be Illinois
proportional to
New York or California or something or Florida. Right. But I looked, and so I think it was 2021 was last year. And it was absolutely insane. It was at least I think it was 74 public officials. And this just means anyone, like Louisiana has over 6,400 public officials down to like the most local level. But they put over 70 away that were convictions. Okay, these are convictions. So when the feds are going after someone, they generally have a really high conviction rate, which means there's definitely more than that are shady. But they didn't necessarily go after or convict. And it just blew my mind that we were top total and not just per capita. And the next one was like 20 less with, I think it was Illinois, unsurprisingly. But yeah, that's just goes to show we just still have a very there's just, historically, we just kind of laugh it off, and it's like it's definitely not funny anymore. I was surprised.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't really thought about it. I think some of this may be like a lot of things in New Orleans. I'm starting to realize I'm reading all these things from the historic New Orleans collection and other things, and we do have this colonial history here, or at least a lot of people do, where you can trace back names of a lot of people who are in power today to the colonial decrees that put them in power. You know what I mean? And it's hard for people to give stuff up like that up, to be honest with you. There's been, a lot of, I think a lot of resistance to the fact that we do live in a free market economy that under American rule, as we know, are that things are more open. And I don't think everybody views it that way, and they maybe weren't raised. So I think some of this corruption stuff in some ways relates to this, like this idea that you have to go through the king and the king's designated people in order to do anything. And that's just not how it's supposed to work. And then we've also kind of replaced it with these other satellite political adjacent organizations that then must bless the things that you're doing. And if you go to other places, I mean, there's some of that in every city in America, probably. You've got to deal with a lot of government bureaucracy, some places more than others, but here there's a particular quality from it. And I think a lot of people in power seem to be unable to resist that temptation, maybe because there's not enough business opportunities, and politics here is maybe viewed as a path to wealth. I see it a lot of times with, we have unique rules about election of judges, and particularly in the legal industry, there's there are so many lawyers that are also in government.
Yeah.
And they're not really, there doesn't seem to be a ton of limits to how they are compensated as lawyers while they're in government. Like there's a lot of things that probably make temptation extremely hard to resist.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I don't know all the things. I get facts from people like you that are, more in tune with it. And I'd like to learn more about it or figure out solutions really more than anything.
Yeah.
But I think part of it starts with like an idea of self-reliance that like we cannot rely on government for everything. I don't want to sound like a small government I believe there's a good place for government, but I think there seems to be a little bit out there that like we need someone to do something for us or need approval, and that we do what the government says we can do versus like we have, I don't know. I don't know if I'm making sense, but it feels like it's the inverse of what it should maybe be, that we can get out there and do things and build businesses and, take care of problems. And I do see that spirit in New Orleans. Like, I don't know any other place that the citizens go out and just deal with city infrastructure issues that the city's neglecting to do. Like there's no one in California I've ever seen clean storm drains or clean up roads or warn citizens that there's a pothole that will swallow your car. So we've got something, but I think we need to take it to the next level and make sure we elect officials that empower those doing something about problems rather than, or at least not stand in the way so much.
Yeah. I mean, like what you're talking about makes sense with, obviously you want the government to be functioning properly to provide value back to its citizens and services and all that. And it's severely dysfunctional for many reasons. But I think, it like one of it is at the state legislature, people like to focus on Congress and the senators and House of Representatives, when really like who's really screwing us as a state legislature, sheriffs, DAs, more local officials at the state and local level. Like for instance, they only get paid, I think they get paid $16,000 if you're a state legislator, Senate or House of Reps. And then they have some per diem that adds up to like $30K. But these are people, for one, you have to be able to take the time off of work to run for office, but also these are people who are generally getting paid well in their private life before going into public office, and it just breeds corruption when they're not getting paid well, of course.
And a lot of their income, a lot of times, seems to be along the lines of fixer type.
Sure.
They're lawyers also. I mean, again, I have really close friends who I think have the highest integrity that are in these situations, but I don't know what other states do. Like I'm not educated well about this.
Other states definitely don't pay them well. So, I
mean, that seems like one possible solution is figure out a way for politicians to make more money so they don't have to, or maybe, can't be in such related things while they're serving in office. Like that seems right. I mean, you can't even get, there seems to be an endemic problem that people need to start looking at solutions to for it to change. But
there's just basic things too at the legislature level that like they could just pass laws that make sense. I mean, for one, like the people who oversee the commissions that oversee the different organizations. So like the group that manages the public utilities, they're not barred from getting donations from these same public utilities that they regulate. That shouldn't be okay, right? If you just go look at their contributions, it's full of like energy and water utilities and whatnot. They're just some really basic things. They had a bill up to increase their pay to $60,000. I think last year or the year before, but it didn't pass committee, even though they're just voting to pay themselves more. But that's like a structural thing, because then that means more people could run for office and be like, oh, I can get paid a living wage and be a public official. And
some of it is just the nature of where our society is today, where, I think in a increasingly post-religious world where these political lines are now the tribal dividing lines. I mean, just some of it as I always express to you, I'm like, I don't know how to solve this. I'm very much a noob when it comes to like what's going on in our political realm. I see the problems. The impact that I'm trying to have, I guess, is like saying the organizations, political or otherwise, are great. Let them do their thing. I think the best way sometimes is to lead by example and say, I have no incentive to make the situation in Louisiana sound worse than it is in funding. Like, I just see like that a lot of good companies are getting funded. In fact, I would make the case that it's easier if you've got a really good thing going to get funded here than a lot of places. I have data that could support it. I want to keep pushing those forward. I would like to find frameworks that we can come up with to reward and incentivize this like proactive citizen behavior when people spot a civic problem and want to address it, right? Like if the city budget's not there to do a really good civic improvement project, but then there's some really motivated private citizens that can rally up dollars and get it done, I would love to like just clear the obstacles from that. Like have some ability to get with the whatever commissions need to approve all this stuff to kind of fast track certain types of projects, those seem like, I think those are the biggest things. And, as someone who's been, really involved with all the economic incentives, I tell a lot of my friends that are in politics or in office, in my view, at least, and I know my view doesn't count for anything to anybody. I think there has been companies have taken advantage of incentives that are there, but it would be hard for me to say that the ones that are already here are really the primary beneficiaries, as you mentioned, and that it's like a way forward for us so much as, it's helping a little bit. What seems to like really make people want to stay here and live here are the life things, the culture and life things, like that, they love how much accessible culture there is, that they love like all the bike lanes that have been built. I think more and more software developers, especially coming from the East and West Coast, want legal access to cannabis. You hear that a lot. Like, why is it still so hard to get that done here? Like, there's a lot of things that I think people would, consider moving to New Orleans more if that were available. Yeah. You definitely hear about the school stuff. And it seems like New Orleans actually made a lot of progress with schools, in a relatively short period. So certainly since Katrina, I mean, there are way more options, I think, for people seemingly than there were when I was growing up on that front.
Yeah.
I know it's not perfect, and I'm probably seeing a sliver of society that's fairly well off for this. But anyway.
Another one is remote workers. I know Ben Lavender, he had to move out of state because Stripe said, sorry, even though we do remote, we don't do it in these states because we have to like set up an LLC or county or whatever. And so they could pass a law that incentivizes remote workers to stay here. I've like applied for jobs before and had friends apply where they're like, sorry, you're in Louisiana, even though we're 100% remote.
Really?
And that's a real thing. So
dude, you should publicize those
They would
companies.
just say like, if
you should know those company names.
If your company is less, if this size, you don't have to do X or X to incentivize people to stay here.
Yeah. I mean, and that's not totally ideal, but it's like, it's good things come from that. Like, it's been often remarked that like one of the biggest brain gain attributes we've had is like young people from here moving away, finding a significant other, and then basically saying, I'm moving back home, we're going home now. Sure. And then dragging people with them. Yeah. I've seen some of the biggest companies get basically a result from that. I think if all we got was a bunch of really talented, smart remote workers, like pitching in and advising startups and living here and paying taxes and, I think that would be a great thing. I think obviously communities like in Europe and elsewhere that I've been dealing with that have had some negative issues with like housing affordability and stuff. There's always some externality, I think, with stuff, but yeah, that would be cool. And if there are any of those people out there listening, I hope they reach out to me or you. I'd like to hear from them. I know some of my friends from high school that have worked for some really big name brand tech companies like are here now, and they're trying to get involved and give back and do stuff. And we've had a fair amount of VCs and startup people just stop by because they see the sign in the front on magazine, and they're like, oh, I didn't know things were going on like this here, and I've looked at other things going on in the startup world, but it seems a little different from this. And so there is like a core group. Yeah, well, there's something will emerge on that front. And I think, I don't know, I always see so much positivity. So I love the fact that you're applying your tech knowledge and skills and just your get it doneness to some of the political stuff, and I'm interested to see what comes from that. Do you think the tech community here can play a more vocal or bigger or organized role in some of this stuff? Because I don't know how involved people are with this stuff, but you probably have a better sense of that than I do.
Yeah, I think this plays back to when I talk to any friends or anyone really, when I'm talking about the political side of things, is they are so incredibly jaded. Like they've been through like 3 world wars with they just couldn't, unless they're already involved, they're just like, haha, that's funny with if we're like, oh, we're running progressives or whatever. So there has to be like a tipping point for them to get involved, some momentum, right? And so Mandy Landry's campaign and all that, and was successful, and it was, that energizes people somewhat, but there needs to be some precipice or something that's reached where people get excited and energized, because it's sort of like I'm going out to play Little League and I get a pat on the back when I talk to people about it, because they're just so apathetic about politics here, and understandably. And so they will get involved, I think, as long as I think there's something happening. And perhaps if it was like a hackathon or one thing that they could focus on, because honestly, they're also having babies and whatnot. And I get that. That wasn't an excuse I used to hear before, years ago. People are just, I'm busy or whatever, And so, I think, if certain things happen or people get elected or whatnot, then that would help, electrify them into helping out. But there's definitely things to be done. I at the very least, if you want to, it's confusing if you want to go vote, if you go to the website to figure things out, or if you want to run for office, it's confusing to figure out what you need to do. Maybe may or may not be intentional, but a lot of that could be, much easier facilitated if someone decided to just build their own website kind of thing that explained all that. And it's funny when I have talked to the people at the state level about getting access to the voter registration records, or public officials or ethics and requests and all that, programmatically via an API. They're like, oh, well, no one's asked about that before. Yeah, we could do it, but we haven't yet. And so it's just, it's like they're not, the nerds up there that work in Baton Rouge are not nefarious or anything. It's just no one asks them kind of thing. Yeah.
They're also I've done a lot of public records requests. People think that they're being asked because there's some gotcha thing. Right. And a lot of times that's not it. Like when we're doing it, most of the time it's just because we want to see what's going on and help tell people to educate, because the lack of education is the key thing. Like so many people, still to this day, depending on where you go and get your information on startup activity and venture capital, there's a narrative out there that's it's dire, you can't find anything. And it's certainly hard right now compared to in the past, but there's still a lot of capital being deployed in a lot of deals. And it's just not the case that this is Miseryville all the time. But some people need that to get donations, or they need to create the scarcity environment to I marshal resources in their favor or whatever. Yeah. And
we don't have our own little local tech crunch like we used to, our Silicon Valley news.
Yeah, well, there's still the Southern Star report out there.
It's true.
Publicizing stuff. And I don't know. Some of the little blogs aren't quite as active. The Southern Star report is still out there doing a good job tracking a whole bunch of stuff and activity. We still do the Louisiana Venture and Angel Capital report, which is, I think the best source of data for the actual deals that are happening in angel and venture capital. We also track exits, so I have a lot of that data too. And there's been a lot, tons that aren't always publicized or announced, but there's a tremendous amount of activity. So I'm really optimistic overall. Otherwise, it'd be very hard to do this and want to keep doing it. And yeah, I love this place. It's got something special. It's attracting really cool people, and yeah, hopefully we can improve some of the things that the area is weak in. And I mean, I think contrary to like losing what made New Orleans or makes New Orleans, you know, we are used to welcoming like 18.5 million people a year into this city and area. We want some of them to stay permanently, maybe not all of them, but the city has a lot more capacity than it currently supports. Like our population, post Katrina is a fraction of what it was before, and the population in the 90s is a fraction of what it was in the 60s and 70s. So I've never heard anybody say that was the worst era here ever. It seems like maybe there were all these golden era years, and we should be looking for ways to get back to that. There's never been a better chance for a city that's beloved and has good cultural stuff to stand out and be part of the future, but also maintain the interesting things about its past that make it great. Like as the world becomes more digital and as workforce become more mobile, people get a choice. We should want them to choose here, right? We should want more people to care. We have opportunities we led the world in drilling holes 3,000 feet and taking things out of the earth. There's no reason why we can't lead the earth in helping heal itself either. We have the same kinds of talent and entrepreneurial spirit and just craziness that allowed the society to do what it could. We should be the future for that innovation. We have communities on the coast that can be test cases for what most of humanity is going to go through in the next 20 to 50 years with sea level rise and et cetera. So yeah, it's not the time to squander the opportunity. It's a time if you're out there, move back here and come and be part of it. And if you're here, get in touch with me and Max and just come hang out and get each other excited, because there's a lot of obstacles I feel like we have to keep pumping each other up. Because like you said, I've gone through it. I go through it all the time. You get sick of it's that thing of New Orleans, I love you, but you're bringing me down. Faulty sound systems. And you got to overcome it, but there's a buddy system involved in overcoming it.
I think that's a good point. I was just thinking, I was talking about this with someone with because after the startup bus, someone did a startup plane, but we should do a startup riverboat or barge or something. Would be fun, a little retreat down the river. I got something in the works on that. Okay. But it shouldn't be the Silicon Bayou yacht that Ray Nagin and Greg Meffert and the CTO of the City of New Orleans got caught on together, handing contracts back and forth. Right. Well, actually, if none of us are public officials. Yeah, I doubt any of us are going to be public officials. But and none of us will be able to be public officials anyway. And also, we should just be balling and go up and down the Mississippi and have a boat big enough and not be in Lake Pontchartrain. Yeah. Well, I've got a bunch of like-minded people up and down the river ready to roll. We've got a bunch of other people in the Gulf South. So I think there's something happening here, and I think. All these old river port cities have a lot of things in common, and I'm looking forward to doing something like that, hopefully with you and others. So yeah, we just got to find the time, money, and energy as always. Yeah, I think what I tell my friends, I was like, they're always slacktivism, posting Instagram stories or whatever. I'm like, why don't you just do something about it instead of bitching all the time, whether it's, a startup or political or whatever. I'm so tired of that, Yeah. So I would give the same sentiment to anyone. Awesome, man. Well, with that, I think we should end this and talk about these next couple things we're going to do here and keep them going, because that's the exciting part. Yeah, awesome.
All right, man. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah,
here.
thank you. It's fun.
All right. Later. Bye, everyone.